Welcome back to Two Gals in a Glass Half Full. Today we're going to be talking about anxiety and depression, but from a different lens than we've talked about it before. Before we get started, Dr. Jess, what is in your glass?
I've got my cup of coffee this morning, and it's I don't drink it very fast, and then it gets a little bit too cold, which is why I leave it in this mug, and I'm just almost done with one cup. So, Dr. Bobbie, what's in your glass?
I have some lemon water that I just started yesterday, and I really like it. For some reason, I don't like lemon in my water, but all this is that's what it says it is, but I like it a lot more. So,
Yeah,
drinking it up.
there we go. I like it. And with us today, we have a special guest. Her name is Amanda. Amanda, before we do our intros, what's in your glass?
I have stolen my husband's water bottle, and it is a mostly empty, just hydro flask full of water.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, as long as, anything that works well for staying hydrated, I think that is overall what's important. And so today we're going to be talking a lot about, anxiety, depression, but then from a lens that's a little bit different than how we've talked about that before. So we've got that lens of bringing in science, physiology, some of the newer research in the last decade, which is why we're very excited to be talking with Amanda. And so going ahead with that, Amanda, what's your background? What's your why in this world that you've really gotten into?
Oh, that's a big question. So I am a neuroscience and trauma-informed anxiety and depression coach, and we take a nervous system lens to helping our clients understand, radically redefine how they understand anxiety and depression, how they engage with that symptom management and recovery. And my why is a lot of personal journey. So my background, I have a master's degree in kinesiology, emphasis exercise psychology. So my research, my thesis was I looked at a movement-based program for students with depression. So it was a peer mentored movement-based program for students with depression. And my research looked at that bidirectional relationship between social support, movement, and depression. At the time, my sister was struggling with pretty heavy depression. I also, at the time, had unacknowledged by me at the time, debilitating anxiety, productivity-based self-worth. I just was really high functioning, but over functioning had become so commonplace for me. It was just my default. It was my baseline. And I didn't realize the physiological toll that being in a constant state of fight or flight, that constant sympathetic state was taking on my body. And it would be a while before I realized that. And why I do the work that I do now in the way that I do now is because the mainstream options for mental health fell short for me. And then as I started to share my story, I found out they were falling short for so many other people. And so the mainstream options being, I finally went to the doctor and was like, why? Why am I this way? Why am I struggling this way? Help me understand. And like a lot of people, I left 10 minutes later with a prescription and not a whole lot of context. And there's a time and place. Meds played an integral role in my healing journey, and they helped me manage symptoms. They didn't help me heal and get to the root of what was causing those symptoms in the first place. And similarly, talk therapy, while it was helpful for the season that it was helpful for, what I found was it was a place to go and talk through things, but I was never leaving with tangible tools. It was never translating to life outside of therapy, looking any different, feeling any different. And it wasn't until I really came across something called the polyvagal theory and contextualized what I was experiencing through this nervous system lens. That for me, it flipped a switch. It turned my healing journey on its head overnight. And this is what we find our clients experience so often too, is when you understand how your mind body system works, you can start to work with it instead of feeling against it for like the first time in your life. And that's really, really empowering to shift your narrative from anxiety and depression is just this brokenness within me to, oh, actually, all my symptoms make sense. Every single one of them makes sense. All of me, who I am and how I show up in the world makes sense based on my past lived experiences and my current life circumstances. And I can see so much measurable healing without constantly having to relive that hardest experience in my life over and over and over and over again. Because when you understand the system, a lot of times your brain and your body don't know the difference between retelling a traumatic experience and re-experiencing that. And so what I realized was I continued to retell this story, which just reiterated how hard that experience. I was re-experiencing that every time without knowing how to keep myself feeling in the present moment. So, and I'll expand on that a little bit because I feel like that was a confusing statement for people who don't have context. So maybe I'll even just peel it back to what is the nervous system. So when I'm talking about your nervous system, I'm talking about your brain and all the nerves, everything that runs down your spine, and specifically your autonomic nervous system. So this is the part of your nervous system that controls a lot of your autonomic or automatic body functionings, your breath, your heart rate, respiration. And we've all heard the terms like the fight or flight state, right? That fight or flight state, that's when your body is in what's called a sympathetic state. And when you're feeling calm and regulated, that's a parasympathetic state. And I often use these terms. The green zone is when you're regulated. The yellow zone is when you're really activated. We also have a nervous system state that I refer to as your red zone. This is a shutdown state. And I think the easiest way to understand anxiety and depression on the spectrum of nervous system states is I'm going to invite all of you listening to visualize a ladder for a minute. So I want you to visualize a ladder, and this ladder has 3 colored boxes on it. At the top of the ladder is a green box. In the middle of the ladder is a yellow section, and at the bottom of the ladder is that red zone. And so that green section represents being in a regulated, calm, healthy, optimized physiological state. We're in that rest and digest state. In that middle zone is that fight or flight, that activated state. And our physiology, our body changes in real and measurable ways when we're activated, when we don't feel safe. The way that our eyes change, our heart rate changes, our breath changes. And then at the bottom of that ladder is that shutdown state, that burned out, fatigued, depressed place. Now, in your mind's eye, imagine a bucket. This bucket represents your nervous system. We all understand that a bucket can only get so full before it's either too heavy to pick up or it starts to overflow. So now you are standing at the top of this ladder with your bucket, and the bucket is quite empty. There's not a lot of load. And when we think about load in that bucket, that water, that's stressors. That could be your past lived experiences. That could be your daily stressors. It could be relationships, environmental stressors, an old injury that wasn't rehabbed properly. And in that, to be in that regulated state, you have to have a manageable amount of stressors in your bucket. So imagine that bucket's maybe half full and you have the capacity to carry that no problem. You're up at the top of the ladder. Now, as life or you add more and more load to that bucket, it pushes you further and further down that nervous system ladder. Our nervous system's default response to stress is activation first. We want to usually avoid, it's usually that flight response first. We want to avoid stressors or we want to fight them off. We just want them to go away. And so what'll happen is we'll stay in that yellow zone. Now, if the load either lasts too long, we aren't able to run or fight off those stressors, figuratively or literally, or more stressors keep coming, that bucket gets heavier and heavier. So either our strength wears out or that bucket gets heavier and heavier. It pushes us further and further down that ladder into the red zone. And that red zone, this shutdown state, based on the polyvagal theory, this is called your dorsal vagal shutdown state. It has 2 primary jobs: to disconnect us so that we don't feel any more emotional or physical pain, and to immobilize us to conserve energy. So that yellow zone is a mobilized state. We want to move, we want to go, we want to take action. It feels really, really urgent. That's the story of that state is I have to right now, I have to right now or else. And when we get pushed down into that shutdown state, which is where depression lives, the story is it doesn't even matter. I don't matter. And the physiological function of that state is to disconnect. And we know that there are numbing agents that get released into our body when we're in that state. There's a lot of dissociation from our body, from our relationships, and to immobilize. And this is something we see in mammals everywhere. There's a really cool video on YouTube somewhere of a gazelle, I think, and like a lion. And we see that this lion, this is a stressor, this is a threat, starts to come after. Their first response is to run. They know it's not an option to fight. So they run. And when they realize that this threat is inescapable, their body just goes limp. It shuts down. It basically collapses before they're actually even harmed to the point of needing to be limp. And what the body is doing is it's genuinely releasing numbing agents so that it's like death is inevitable. So we're going to make it as quick and painless as possible. And then for whatever reason, this lion gets distracted before it can do any major harm. And you see this gazelle making its way back up the nervous system ladder. And so it goes from this collapsed shutdown state to like realizing that the threat is actually gone. It stands up. And what you see happen is it starts to shake, starts to quiver. And this is the gazelle's body literally discharging the unneeded stress, the unneeded survival energy, that flight energy that it was in, it gets discharged. That moves it from the red zone to the yellow zone back into the green zone. And then it just like gallops off to the watering hole to find its friends, or I don't know what it does to do. But this is a really cool representation of how our nervous systems are designed to be self-regulating when they're allowed to do what nervous systems do. And what we often see in humans is there's never the opportunity to discharge that unneeded stored survival energy, or there's not like a socially appropriate way to do it. And so one of like a really trendy thing to talk about in like the somatic healing world is like shaking, like somatic shaking. And it like, there's a lot of like really eye-catching and interesting, content that people can make with that. But the reality is all mammals do it. My dog, after it chases a squirrel and doesn't get it, will do a quick shake and a yawn. And these are ways of your body discharging unneeded survival energy, because if it doesn't, it gets stored and it gets stored and it gets stored. And so when we say like trauma is stored in your body, that's what we mean, is that this tension, this survival energy, that stress cycle never completes itself. And so this is why we are so easily triggered in situations that feel familiar to our system as situations in the past where we didn't have that closure. We weren't able to move ourselves back up that nervous system ladder. And so I know I have just taken your question about my why and run with it, but kind of to bring it back together a little bit, that's our lens of understanding anxiety and depression through this nervous system lens, is that when we can get quiet, when we can have support in saying, what's in my stress bucket? What happens for all of our clients is this beautiful moment of, oh, my life doesn't feel hard because I suck, because I'm broken. My load feels heavy because it's heavy. And an analogy I often use is, how many of you would walk into a gym? How many of you who are not already really competitive power lifters would walk into a gym, see a 300-pound weight on the floor and be like, got it, right? We wouldn't even try. And we know if we tried too hard, we'd probably hurt ourselves. But so many of us are walking around with a 300-pound life that nobody taught us how to carry. Nobody trained us for it. And then we write this narrative that we are wrong for not being able to carry that load well. And what I find happens so often for our clients, especially clients who feel like maybe meds were helpful or therapy's been helpful, but something's missing or it's not getting them there. My narrative became, well, maybe I'm too broken to heal. Maybe there's something so wrong with me, I can't get better because these things seem to work for other people, but not me. And when I understood it through this nervous system lens, when I was able to look at my daily habits, my past lived experiences, the relationships in my life, there was this moment of just softening in my system of like, oh, yeah, maybe my anxiety for a long time made sense. And then the depression that followed years of anxiety was just my system being too tired to keep carrying that load. What do I want to do differently now? And that opened me up to the healing I'd been looking for in other places and hadn't found it.
I love that visualization, that analogy of the ladder. I feel so easy to connect to because Dr. Jess and I both have our own business. We're doing the podcast. We have families. We have so much. And there was one point in my life where you just feel like I can't do everything, but I need to, but I can't. And talking about being in that red zone, I can relate where my list is 300 things long that I need to do, but all I can do right now is lay in this bed. Um, and that's not me. And it just feels like I can't get myself to get up and do anything. And I remember Dr. Jess and we used to have this meeting on Mondays, and it was a half an hour meeting, and it was something we loved and we were enjoyed and we want to learn. And it was only half an hour in our day. But for some reason, it was just causing so much stress. And the day that we both decided, like, this is not the time for this right now, like, this will come later in our lives, we can come back to it. It's amazing how much relief from that of not having to attend that 30-minute meeting provided, and how much more I could breathe during that time. So it's amazing how much even just finding one or two things to lighten your load, how it can make such a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think just like because that meeting was something that we attended with a group, and neither of us could put in the energy to really contribute to the group. So it wasn't even that it was just 30 minutes. It wasn't just the time. It was the feeling of we're not excelling with this. We're like not bringing anything to the table. We're not owning our part of preparing for this meeting. Like we're just showing up. And so then you add more to that, right? And so it's like we both felt like our buckets were too heavy, 100%. And I think in life, when you can just see it that way and get to the point where you can have a bit of the just pause mindset of like, what part of this do I own? Right? Like we didn't have to attend this. Like this was something we were just like adding on that is eventually going to help our businesses, but not like right now. And right now we have to live for today. And so I think it happens to everybody at some point in time where you're trying to prepare for the future, but by doing so much preparation for the future, you're not living in today. And it's so easy to do.
Yeah. And I think what happens with our clients also is, especially with our one-on-one coaching program, it's a 4-month program and they get about a half or 2/3 the way through the program. And all of a sudden it becomes really clear to them that there's so much about their life they don't like, or so much about their life they wouldn't choose again today, now knowing what they know about them. And this happens because especially when there was an unpredictable childhood or adverse experiences in our childhood, we will always opt for the thing that keeps us safe, the thing that keeps us connected, the thing that gets our needs met, even if it means abandonment of self, of who we are, what we really want. And so by the time we're adults, our sense of self is really muddied. It's who actually are we? What do we want? What am I doing because I think that I should? What am I doing because I actually want to do? Am I doing? I don't necessarily want to do it, but it just needs to get done for the life I want to live or the way I want to raise my kids or whatever. And that's something that when we can drop a lot of the shame around anxiety and depression. What I actually love about understanding it through this nervous system lens is that a lot of our clients get to a place where they actually don't use those terms anymore. Instead of anxiety, it's activation. Because like you said, we all get to a place where we feel this sense of urgency inside of like, I have to do this, or else, right? Or else my children are going to be, totally ruined by me. My business is going to be totally ruined by me. My marriage is going to be totally ruined by me. My friends are going to leave, and we don't always want to label that as anxiety, but it's totally an activated nervous system, activated thoughts. Similarly, we all experience a season of life that's too heavy, whether that's grief or overwhelm or burnout. We have so many different words for it, but we all experience just this state of feeling really shut down or disconnected. And so what a lot of our clients will do is instead of, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so anxious this morning, they just shift it to, I'm feeling really activated this morning. And what can be really helpful about that language shift is in our programs and the way that we work with clients, we teach them how to work with their physiology. If you're on the brink of a panic attack, don't you dare try to take a deep breath, right? Because what a deep breath does, especially when you take an extended exhale, so with every breath you take, when you inhale, your heart rate speeds up just a little bit. And when you exhale, your heart rate slows down just a little bit. So when you do an extended exhale breath, like these calming breaths of, you're slowing down your heart rate just a little bit longer than you're speeding it up. What this does inside of us is it turns on our parasympathetic nervous system. It turns on that relaxation response, which you might think, Amanda, don't I want to do that? If I'm on the brink of a panic attack, don't I want to turn on my relaxation response? But when it comes to regulating your nervous system, first, you have to meet your nervous system where it's at. When we are in an activated, mobilized state, especially an intense of enough state that we're about to have a panic attack, if you try to strong arm your physiology into being calm, it's going to flip you the bird. And it's going to be like, you don't understand. We're in danger. We need to move. And you're trying to calm me down? Absolutely not. And that could be that kind of internal war between like what you want and what your nervous system feels like you need, and your nervous system will always win. It could be what tips you over the edge into that actual panic attack. And so one of the things we help our clients do, and it's so much easier to do when they use this terminology of I'm feeling really activated or disconnected or shut down, is can you learn the signs and the symptoms of earlier activation of stress? Can you identify whether you're just like a level 1 activated, or our scale goes 1, 2, and 3. So while if you're thinking at 1 to 10, 3 may not seem big, but 3 is like the version that happens before panic. Different tools are going to work. If you can catch your this activation in your system, if you can catch your anxiety at a 1 or a 2, a deep breath might totally be what your system can be like, oh yeah. We're holding a lot of tension from our past stories, but right now we're safe. We can let that go. Let's calm our body down. Let's move up that ladder. But if you're at a level 3 and you go to take a deep breath, your nervous system's going to be like, absolutely not, ma'am. There's a saber-toothed tiger in your closet. And so knowing that, okay, I'm feeling really activated. I know this means I need to shake it out. I need to go for a walk. I need to allow this mobilization to move. And so we often call this tool layering or like sequencing. And so you start with something that's mobilized. So maybe you're like, I'm going to just jump and shake for a second. And then I'm going to start to sway side to side. We do a lot of vision therapy drills in our practice because your visual system directly communicates with that autonomic nervous system. So maybe you start kind of looking around your room. There's an exercise a lot of our clients love called color spotting. Really simple. You just pick a color. So Dr. Jess, if I told you to pick a color, any color, what would you choose?
Blue.
Blue. Okay, that's your color. Because when you're in an activated state, you don't want to make a choice. So that's your color. That's always your color. When you're feeling stressed or activated, you just look around the room, slowly scanning back and forth, and you count or you name all the blue objects. And what this does is this opens up your vision field. So when you're in a state of fight or flight, your pupils dilate, but you get really tunnel visioned. Your
Yeah.
peripheral vision turns off, all of it. And so what color spotting does is, number one, it acts as a cognitive distraction. So it distracts you from what your brain is spiraling out. But two, it engages what we call panoramic viewing, which is kind of this lateral right to left, which is our natural view pattern. It engages distance viewing, which registers as more safe to our nervous system. And it often opens up your peripheral vision. All of those things send these micro messages of, hey, we're safe. Look around the room. There isn't actually a saber-toothed tiger here. And then from there, maybe you start to take deep breaths. And that's how you worked with your nervous system to walk yourself back from a panic attack versus somebody sitting there and saying, take a deep breath, while meaning they don't understand that your state is mobilized. We need to meet our system in mobilization and then slowly walk it back. And so in the way that we work with clients, we approach healing anxiety and depression through a proactive and a reactive toolboxes. And so these are separate categories, separate ways of working through this. Reactive are these like in the moment. I'm there now. I'm activated now. I'm shut down now. What are the tools in the moment to help me either create more capacity to be with this emotion or to take some of the intensity off of it so that I can breathe again? So that's like your SOS toolbox, and everybody needs that.
Yes.
And that's never going to be enough to put a bunch of Band-Aids on a boat that's got a ton of holes. Eventually, we've got to figure out where are the holes in the boat? Why are the holes in the boat multiplying? And the proactive is a lot about the way that you live your daily life. So some of the proactive work is what we think of traditionally when healing anxiety and depression. You might have to go there. You've got to talk about that hard thing, rewire that part, reassociate some of those experiences with new meaning or release that stored trauma from your body. But a lot of it also is, what are the habits that make up your daily life? Because if you are consistently sleeping less than 8 hours a night, like you should be exhausted. If you are consistently skipping breakfast and grabbing coffee and putting yourself on this blood sugar spike and drop roller coaster, we know that that's correlated with anxiety. So if you're riding a blood sugar roller coaster all day, if you are undernourishing your body, all of that stresses out your nervous system. So are the symptoms that we label as anxiety, are they caused by past trauma? Or are they caused by a vitamin D deficiency, a lack of sleep, a lot of toxic endocrine disrupting fragrances in your home, right? Now, all of a sudden, it's not this mysterious diagnosis that came out of nowhere. As we unpack the stress bucket, it's like, oh yeah, there is a stress load here. My anxiety, when I am under-rested, over-caffeinated, and undernourished, is not a disorder. That's actually physiological order. It makes sense. And our nervous system is always scanning. I say outside, inside, and in between. It's scanning your external environment, your internal environment, and then your relationships. And it's determining, am I safe? Am I safe? Is anything wrong? And so that panic attack out of nowhere at the grocery store, is it because there was something particularly triggering, a particular person or a smell or whatever? Or is it that you just had the one last drop in your stress bucket that started to overflow it? And that overflow is your symptoms. And that could have been that you stubbed your toe, that you had a thought about the one more thing you have to do. And this just provides for our clients and for me in my own healing journey, just so much more tangible context and tools and ways to start to manage that activation or that shutdown that shows up in your daily life and makes you not feel like yourself and robs you of feeling like, a lot of our clients say, like, I live a good life, but it never feels good. It's like, yeah, because you're carrying a 300-pound bucket everywhere you go. And what does it look like to do that differently?
Yeah, I think I love the way that you explained it, because it's one of those things that can feel very nebulous, and it doesn't need to be at all. Like, it really doesn't. Like, we like, as physical therapists, like we do study nervous system, we study autonomic nervous system. And I think because of that, it gave me that understanding of, oh, my heart rate's elevated right now. Logically speaking, I know that this is coming from my nervous system, which is then being triggered because of something, which could be a thought, could be something else. And so just the understanding of studying the nervous system to me was validating of like, I get this now. I'm not a mental health counselor. I don't specialize in any of this, but I can recognize an elevated heart rate and an elevated breathing rate, right? And I could also recognize I can't just breathe through this. I need to go for a run, right? Like that feels better to me, right? Like it's like I have to, I can't just like bombard this, right? But when you explain it in such like tangible ways, I'm like, oh, well, this is awesome because like
Mhm.
just intuitively you just kind of go with what works versus what doesn't work, right? But like coming about it from like a very science physiologic based, it's just validating. And I think hopefully people listening to this can understand like there's nothing wrong with you. Like this is what your nervous system does. Like it is going to get riled up. It is going to try and protect you from whatever is going on. But I love, Amanda, like the strategies you gave about like shaking and like searching for something in the room that's blue, because I can't always just leave and go for a run,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't work. That strategy works sometimes, but that just like anywhere, I mean, go into a bathroom, right? Like remove yourself from the situation, get into a place where, someone's not gonna laugh at you, but like have this like those tools in your tool belt ready to go so you don't have to think. I immediately said blue, it's my favorite color. And so like that's something, and I love to count. Like when I'm in a stressful situation, like I don't love MRIs, right? So I just count through the MRI and I get through it. It gives me something for my brain to focus on. Nothing's going to hurt me. I just don't love that machine touching me. I don't like how close it gets. It feels like I might get stuck, but I don't. And I can get through it. All I do is count. That's all I do. And I get through it, no problem, right? So like counting blue things, 100%. My brain would resonate with that, for sure. So I love all of this. I think it's, again, like anybody that's listening, if you resonate this with this kind of thinking and it feels like it's helpful, like definitely like check in the notes below. Like all of Amanda's information is going to be listed there. And also just like share this episode with somebody, or more than one person, right? Like you like this kind of information, I think, is what needs to get spread out there, of that like there is something you can do about it, and it doesn't have to be this like major like undertaking that is so traumatic and hard to get through. Like you can do it step by step with people that are trained and understand it and have lived it. I mean, Amanda, you're telling us like all these examples of like, I get it, I've been there, right? Like I'm not talking to you from this like, like outside perspective of like, well, I hope I hope this works. It seems like it makes logical sense. I mean, you've lived it. So we're gonna be wrapping this episode up, but Amanda, I really, really appreciate you coming on, and I
Thank
very
you.
much resonate with all of, like literally all of the strategies. I'm like, that's just awesome. We've never had somebody tell us those strategies before.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if we're blown away by this kind of information, hopefully other people listening will as well, and they'll find it to be approachable and helpful and something that they can, if they're struggling with any of these kinds of feelings, reaching out for help and to know that help is out there. So, all right, everybody, stay tuned for next week.